As the blast faded away, a figure started to take shape. At first it was just an outline, but then colors burst in. I saw a tumble of long black hair spreading out in all directions. A simple white dress clung to her body. Her arms and legs were super slender. The girl's eyes were closed, and her arms were crossed tightly over her chest. She floated gently down toward the ground, shining like a living beam of light. Just as suddenly as it had started, the explosion vanished. The girl stopped moving, hovering just above the ground. Her super long eyelashes fluttered and slowly lifted as she opened her eyes. Suddenly I was staring into eyes that were as dark and mysterious as the night sky. I was frozen in place, couldn't move, speak, or even blink. Then her soft pink lips curled into a gentle smile that looked totally heavenly. This made me feel brave enough to talk. "Hey Yui. Do you remember me?" I asked. As soon as the words left my mouth, I glanced down at myself and jumped in surprise. I looked totally different from the last time Yui saw me. I didn't have a mirror to check myself, but I knew my clothes and face must have changed a lot. I was worried she might not recognize me, but it turns out I had nothing to worry about. Yui's mouth opened wide, and her voice rang out, sounding just like a little bell. "Finally we meet again, Papa," she exclaimed. Tears sparkled in her eyes as she threw her arms open and jumped into my hug. "Papa," she cried, squeezing me tight with her skinny arms and nuzzling her cheek against mine. She kept saying "Papa" over and over, like she couldn't believe I was really there. I wrapped my arms tightly around her tiny frame. A sob escaped my throat, and I couldn't hold it back. Yui, the girl I met in the virtual world of Sword Art Online. We only spent 3 days together before she disappeared. But those memories are etched in my mind forever. It wasn't a long time, but it felt like an eternity. Every moment we shared is still vividly clear to me. Those were the only happy moments in the super tough battle in Aincrad. I held Yui tight, feeling a weird mix of sadness and sweetness that brought back old memories. It was like magic. I really thought I could see Asuna again someday. We could go back to our normal lives. This was the first time I felt sure about it since I got back to the real world. I plopped down on a stump in a quiet corner of the clearing where I had just arrived a few minutes before. "What's going on here?" I wondered. Yui was snuggled up on my lap, and I was trying really hard not to ask her about Asuna right away. She was so happy that she had stopped rubbing her cheek against my chest for a second, and gave me a confused look. "What's going on?" she seemed to be saying. Then she asked, "We're not actually inside the game, Sewe-o-war." I took a deep breath and told her everything that had happened since she disappeared. I managed to save Yui by turning her into a special kind of data that my computer could store. We finally beat the game and the world of Aincrad was destroyed. But then we found ourselves in a new world called Alfheim. It was weird because even though it was a new place, some of the old stuff from before was still here, like Kirito's data. There was one thing that was really worrying me though. Asuna still wasn't awake. "Just a minute," Yui said, closing her eyes and tilting her head to the side, like she was listening for something I couldn't hear. Then her eyes popped open, and she looked right at me. "I think this world is a copy of the Sword Art Online server," she said. "A copy?" I asked, curious. "Yes," Yui replied. "The core program and graphic system are exactly the same. I mean, I'm here, right? But for some reason the Cardinal System's version number is a bit old. And the game part on top of all that is totally different." I thought about it for a moment. Alfheim Online came out just a year after the SAO incident. That was also around the time Argus closed down and RCT took over its assets. Imagine if RCT took over Argus's cool technology. They could have turned it into a brand new virtual reality game, like a fresh coat of paint on an old car. As long as they connected everything to the core engine that made the game feel real, it would be way cheaper than starting from scratch. That's why I thought the world of this game was just as detailed and awesome as Sword Art Online. It all makes sense now. AOO is actually running on a modified version of SAO's system. That made sense, but then a question popped up. Why would my personal data be here in AOO? "Let me check your data first, Papa," she said. She closed her eyes again and focused. "Yes, that explains it. This is the same character data you had in SAO. The way it's set up is almost identical. So when you logged in, it just copied over your old skill information. My hit points and mana points were recalculated, so they didn't transfer over, but that's not the worst of it. All my items are messed up too. If I don't get rid of them, I'll trigger the error detection protocol and get in trouble. That's a good idea, I agreed. I quickly ran my finger across my entire inventory to select all the damaged items. I had to be tough and make a hard choice. Some of the things I owned were super special, reminding me of my adventures in Aincrad. But I couldn't save everything. To be honest, I couldn't even read the names of most of them anymore. So, I took a deep breath and deleted all of those items at once. I only kept the basic stuff I started with. Then I wondered, what about all my skill data? Luckily, the system said it was okay to keep that. You might raise some eyebrows because of how quickly you've leveled up. But as long as no human game master checks too closely, you should be okay. I guess I used to be a player who relied on skill, but now I'm more like a cheater, I said with a shrug. The thing is, I didn't care if my character was overpowered. I had a mission to complete. I needed to climb the world tree and find Asuna. So I wasn't worried about having a fun or challenging experience. When I looked at my skills again, I realized that there's more to being strong in this game than just numbers. Imagine playing a game where your character's power isn't just about numbers. In Alfheim Online, you won't find stats like agility or strength that can make or break your character. The boosts you get in health and magic points are small, and getting better with weapons only unlocks new types to try out. It doesn't make them more powerful. What really makes a difference is how you move and make decisions in the game. Unlike other games like Sao where cool sword skills were a big deal, Alfheim Online is all about action and being quick on your feet. Your character's success depends on how well you play, not just on their stats. Imagine being in a game where you're super powerful but you can't just stand there and expect to win. That's not how this world works. There's one big mystery though, magic. It didn't exist in the other game I played, called SAO, but here, I have something called illusory magic on my skill list. I'm guessing it's a basic skill for someone like me, a Spriggan. The problem is, I don't know how it works or what it can do, until I try it out, or someone uses it against me. I looked down at UI, who was still cuddled up against me, sleeping like a happy cat. Hey UI, what about you? I asked. How do you work in this world? UI isn't human, she's a special kind of computer program that escaped from SAO when it got glitchy. Now, in the year 2025, scientists have created artificial intelligences that are almost as smart as humans. Computers were getting smarter and smarter, making it harder to tell if they were really intelligent or just pretending. Some artificial intelligences, called AIs, for short, were so advanced that they were changing the game. These super advanced AIs were mind-blowing technological achievements. Yui was one of them, and she might just be the first computer program that's truly intelligent. The real deal. Nothing else mattered to me because I had Yui, and she felt the same way about me. We loved each other, and that's all that counted. Yui started explaining something to me. In this game Alfheim Online, there are special helpers called navigation pixies, she said. They're like computer programs that look and act like humans. And guess what? That's what I am. As she talked, her eyebrows scrunched up in concentration. Suddenly she vanished in a burst of light. I yelled in shock, "What's going on?" I was about to jump up and look around when I saw something weird on my knees. It was a tiny girl, no bigger than my thumb. She wore a pink dress that looked like flower petals, and her tiny arms and legs stuck out of it. But the craziest thing was the 2 pairs of see-through wings on her back. She looked just like a real fairy. Yui was a little different, but her cute face and long black hair were definitely hers. "This is me as a pixie," she said with a grin. She stood up on my knees, put her hands on her hips, and fluttered her wings back and forth. I was amazed. "Ooh," I exclaimed, poking her cheek with my finger. "Hey, that tickles," Yui giggled and zoomed up into the air with a tinkling sound to get away from me. She landed on my shoulder, jingling softly. "Do you still have super user powers like before?" I asked her. Yui looked a bit disappointed and said, "No. I'm stuck with just basic info like reference data and map details. I can also check the status of players I've talked to before. But that's about it. I still can't get into the main database." Okay, here's the thing. I took a deep breath to share some major news. "Asuna, your mom is actually here in this world." Asuna's eyes widened in surprise. "What? Mama's here?" She jumped off my shoulder and floated right in front of my face. "What do you mean?" I started to explain, but then I stopped. I was going to tell her about Sugu, But something held me back. You see, it was the heavy feelings of sadness and anger from people that had almost destroyed you a long time ago. I didn't want her to face any more mean-spirited people. Even after the SAO server disappeared. Asuna never woke up in the real world, I said. Then I heard a rumor that someone who looked just like her was seen in LO. It might be just a random person who looks similar. But since we don't have any other leads. The person I was talking to looked surprised. I had no idea. I'm sorry, they said, calling me Papa. I wish I could just check the player database to find out what's going on, but I don't have that power. Luckily, I think I know where we might be able to find who we're looking for. It's a place called the World Tree.
Do you know where it is?
The World Tree is really far away. More than 30 miles to the northeast. That's huge.
To put it into perspective, it's about 5 times as big as the base floor of Aincrad. I couldn't help but wonder, why did I get logged in so far away from everything else? Yui didn't seem to know the answer. Maybe my location got mixed up with someone else, who was playing near me in real life. Or maybe there was just a glitch that sent me way out here. I'm not really sure how I got here. It would have been awesome if I had just appeared next to the World Tree, but no such luck. Someone told me that in this game you can actually fly. I stood up and looked over my shoulder, and then I saw them. I had wings. They were a cool gray color and shaped like an insect's wings, with sharp angles. I was totally clueless about how to use them though. So, how do you make these things fly? I asked. Yush told me there was a special controller that would help. Just stick out your left hand and pretend you're grabbing something. She said. I did what she told me, holding out my hand and making a squeezing motion. To my surprise, I was suddenly holding a simple-looking joystick. Okay, so if you pull it back you'll go up, and if you push it down you'll go down. Yushi explained. I learned how to control my new wings. To spin around I just had to turn the stick left or right. Pressing a button made me go faster, and letting go slowed me down. It sounded easy enough. So I slowly pulled the stick back. The wings on my back suddenly opened up all the way, and started glowing softly. Then I pulled really hard. Whoa, I shouted as I lifted off the ground. At first I rose up slowly. When I was a few feet in the air, my body stabilized, and I tried pressing a round button on top of the stick. I started moving forward, and it felt amazing, smooth and easy. After trying out a few moves, like going down and spinning around, I began to get the hang of controlling my flight. It was actually pretty simple compared to other virtual reality flying games I'd played before. Okay. I think I've got this, I said. Now, can you tell me some basic stuff? Where's the nearest town? Someone replied. There's a place called Swilvane to the west. Whoa, look out, she exclaimed, her eyes wide with surprise. What's wrong? I asked, but before she could answer, she said, players are coming. It looks like 3 of them are chasing one person. My daughter Yui's face lit up with excitement. Ooh, a battle, let's go check it out. I chuckled and playfully messed up her hair. She never worries about anything. That one. I quickly checked my inventory to make sure my trusty longsword was strapped to my back, just in case things got interesting. I pulled out my sword and gave it a few practice swings. Wow, this thing feels super cheap and flimsy. I thought to myself, but I didn't have time to worry about that now. I put the sword back in its holder and grabbed my flight stick again. Okay, you, take the lead, I said. Roger, she replied, jumping off my shoulder with a fun jingling sound from her bells. Then I started flying for the first time in the game. Just then a blast of magic fire shot out from a salamander, and hit my friend Leaf. Right in the back. Erg,
she cried out.
Even though it didn't really hurt, it felt like a huge hand had slammed into her, making her lose her balance. Leafa's escape wasn't a total disaster, thanks to the magic windshield she had put up. But she still had a long way to go before she reached the safety of the Sylph territory. To make matters worse, her speed was starting to fade. That annoying flight limit was kicking in. In less than a minute her wings would stop working, and she'd be grounded. Leafa gritted her teeth, and plunged into a sharp dive, heading straight for the trees. Leafa knew she couldn't hide forever, not with the enemy's mage on her trail, but giving up wasn't her thing. She'd rather take action, and fight back. So she dove through the treetops and made a beeline for the surface. She weaved in and out of the branches, but her speed started to slow down as she climbed higher. Finally she spotted a clearing with thick grass all around it, and she made her way towards it. The open space was just what she needed. Now she could come up with a new plan to shake off her pursuer. Leafa landed fast, her boots scraping against the ground to stop herself from slipping. She sprinted towards a huge tree and hid behind it. Now out of sight, she raised her hands and started to cast a spell. In the world of Aloe, magic worked like it did in fantasy movies. You had to say the words out loud to make it happen. To cast a spell, you had to say the words just right, loud and clear. If you messed up even a little bit, the whole thing would fail, and you'd have to start over. Leafa knew this, so she spoke her spell fast and carefully. As soon as she finished, a light green mist swirled up from the ground around her feet, hiding her from her enemies. This trick would keep her safe for now, but it wasn't foolproof. If someone had strong searching skills or could cast a special seeing spell, they'd be able to spot her in no time. She froze, holding her breath and staying perfectly still. Suddenly a low buzzing noise filled the air as a group of salamanders approached. They landed behind her in the clearing. She could hear their loud voices over the clanking of their heavy armor. She's got to be around here somewhere. One of them shouted, "Search!" Another one yelled. A third voice chimed in, "You know sylphs are experts at hiding. Let's use magic," someone said. Suddenly a low chanting sound filled the air. She bit her tongue to stop herself from saying something she might regret. Then the sound of grass swishing back and forth got louder and closer. Small dark shapes were moving across the huge tree roots, coming straight for her. As they got nearer, she saw that they were tiny lizards with bright red skin and beady eyes, salamanders. Imagine a big circle of searchers fanning out from the person casting a magic spell. This spell lets them see things that are hidden. If any of these searchers spot a secret player or monster, they'll jump into action. Literally, they'll rush to where the hidden thing is, and then burst into flames. This alerts the spellcaster to exactly where the sneaky creature is hiding. Meanwhile, Leafa was trying to shoo away some lizards. "Go away," she silently told them. "Try somewhere else." She wanted them to leave her alone. They were moving around without a plan, but Leafa's hope for hiding wasn't working out. One of them reached into the fog that was covering her, and suddenly let out a loud high-pitched scream before bursting into flames. "She's over there," someone shouted. The sound of clanking metal got closer and closer, and Leafa knew she had to make a run for it. She couldn't stay hidden behind the tree anymore. She spun around, her sword at the ready, and found herself face to face with 3 salamanders. They were armed with lances and looked like they meant business. The guy on the right was clearly annoyed. He flipped up his helmet visor and glared at her. "You're a real pain," he growled. The leader standing in the middle took over. "Sorry, but we have a job to do," he said firmly. "Hand over your money and stuff, and we'll let you go," one of them growled. But the man on the left had other ideas. "Are you kidding? Let's get rid of her. We haven't caught a girl sylph in ages." He slid up his visor, revealing a face twisted with excitement and cruelty. His eyes gleamed with a mean intensity that made Leafa's skin crawl. She knew all too well that some people got a sick thrill from hunting down women like her. It was a disgusting game, and Leafa felt a wave of revulsion wash over her. Imagine playing a game where some players think it's okay to be super mean and disrespectful, especially to girls. They would say hurtful things, and even virtually touch others in ways that were not cool. But here's the weird part: the game had rules to stop this kind of behavior when people were just hanging out. However, when it came to fighting and killing other players, that was a whole different story. In fact, some really awful people thought that killing a girl's character in the game was the most fun they could have. This was already a big problem in a game called ALO, which had lots of safeguards in place to prevent bad behavior. Leafa's eyes widened as she thought about the epic game that had become a legend. Just thinking about it made her shiver. She dug her feet into the ground, lifted her trusty 2-handed sword overhead, and shot a fierce glare at the salamanders. "I'm taking at least one of you down with me," she declared, ready for battle. "Go ahead, try your best," she snarled, "if you're not scared of getting in big trouble." The 2 men beside her swung their sharp lances, looking furious, but the leader stopped them with a quick wave of his hand. "Stop fighting," he said. "Your wings are tired, and we've got plenty of energy left to keep going." And he was right. Being stuck on the ground while your enemy is flying around is a pretty bad spot to be in on, especially when you're outnumbered. But this girl wasn't about to give up. She definitely didn't want to pay these guys off and beg for mercy. The leader of the group seemed to respect her spirit. "You've got a strong will," he said with a shrug. He raised his lance, flapped his wings, and lifted off the ground, hovering in mid-air. Leafa's friends on either side of her got ready to attack, gripping their controllers tightly. Leafa herself flexed her muscles, preparing to swing with all her might, even if it meant getting hurt by the 3 spears coming her way. The group fanned out to surround her on 3 sides, trapping her. Just as they were about to charge, something unexpected happened. A bush behind them started shaking, and a dark figure emerged from the shadows. Something weird just happened. An object whizzed by. Some salamanders started spinning out of control and crashed into the grass with a loud clang. This surprise event caught Leafa and the salamanders off guard. They all stared at the mysterious thing that had just landed. A man with a light tan pulled himself up from the ground, looking a bit shaken. I've got flying down pat," he said with a grin. "It's just landing that's a little tricky." He seemed pretty carefree, despite his rough landing. This kid had some serious style going on. His hair was spiky and full of energy, and his big, slightly slanted eyes sparkled with mischief. He looked like a total wild child. But what really caught Leafa's attention were the clear gray wings on his back, which meant he was a spriggan. Leafa's eyes widened in shock. Not only was it super rare to see a spriggan so far from their home in the distant east, but this guy was also rocking some pretty cool gear. This guy was totally unprepared. He wore a simple black shirt and pants, with no armor to protect him. The only thing he had to defend himself was a super basic sword that looked like it wouldn't last in a real fight. It seemed like he had just started out on his adventure, and hadn't gotten any good gear yet. What was he thinking, wandering into neutral territory all alone like this? It was like he was asking to get picked on. A girl saw him, and couldn't just stand by and watch him get hurt. She called out to warn him, trying to save him from getting attacked for no reason. "Run!" someone yelled. But the boy in black just stood there, frozen. Didn't he know that PK in player killing players? He casually stuck his hand in his pocket, and looked around at Leafa and the 3 salamanders hovering in the air. Then he said, "You need 3 strong fighters to take down 1 girl." "That's kinda lame," someone said. 2 salamanders got really upset and flew over to surround the guy. They moved in, 1 in front of him and 1 behind, and pointed their lances at him. Ooh. Leafa wanted to help, but she was stuck. The leader was still watching her closely, like a hawk waiting for its prey. The leader sneered. "You must be crazy to barge in here like that. Get ready for action." A salamander faced off with a boy, its visor snapping shut with a loud clang. Suddenly its wings glowed bright ruby red and it charged forward. Another salamander waited in the background, planning to attack a split second later. This way, if the boy dodged the first salamander, the second one would be ready to catch him. It was a tough spot for anyone new to this game. Leafa bit her lip and looked away, not wanting to watch the boy get hurt. But then something totally amazing happened. The boy kept his right hand tucked in his pocket, and with his left hand he simply reached out and grabbed the sharp tip of the lance that was coming straight for him. The air exploded with a bright light and a loud noise, signaling that the boy's defense had worked perfectly.